So let's get started. So whoever arrives, they arrive. So earlier we had already a session that was a little bit more into the depth of technical aspects of this, and then Dr. Longers actually has a session where there is a demos and practical implementations of this. So for this session, the discussion is that can we actually take care of the data protection wherever it kind of resides? You remember when Edward Snowden leaked a lot of, let's say, interesting data out of NSA some time ago. It started kind of a revolution where there's a lot of proprietary cryptos, all traffic is encrypted. You don't really find sites or places where information isn't encrypted really. So if you think about your own services, whatever you use, you pretty much use encrypted services. As far as it comes down to, let's say, anything that you use over web browser, it's pretty much encrypted. So nowadays we are in an interesting situation. Security, we could say it's broken, but is it broken? Depends who do you ask. So if you live in a world, in a bubble where normal firewall and endpoint security, that's kind of equal as security. So if you want to say that you're pretty much safe after you have bought your firewall and some gimmicks. You buy different kind of boxes, different kind of software, and ooh, it's not really that. Security is a lot about doing. But you can see in the news that there's a lot of doing that's left undone. Every organization faces different kind of information security threats. If you read magazines, if you read news, if you read like the Hacker News, for example, you see a lot of information leaks. You see a lot of really stupid things that seem to still work. Even if you have like the best security system, but somebody leaks your username and password, and that's the only authentication method that you kind of rely on, then you're pretty much screwed already. That's what it is. So thinking about encrypted traffic, thinking about the world where we are, the reason why security is a lot of parts broken, if we look from the traditional approach, traditionally we have been in a situation where users and applications and stuff that has happened is within some certain premises. Your users are under control. In the days when people had desktops, when people arrived to work and they worked with desktops, having no laptops, no tablets or smartphones, this was easy to do. You bought your selection of different security devices, software, stuff like that. When I started in the IT business, it was a big thing that you got like antivirus installed to your PC. It was like, oh, it's going to make my PC so slow and crappy, and this is like the worst thing ever. But in those days, this was kind of functional model. And as far as traffic is not kind of elsewhere, it works. But immediately once we get to a situation that users, applications, things scatter around, you still have your own premises, you still have your own network. You have kind of that, but this is being called the hybrid world, hybrid cloud. Somebody says that you have the private cloud and then you have like the public cloud, and then the world kind of scatters around. And then you ask like, okay, what kind of applications my users are actually using? A lot of those security controls become less effective when the world starts to look like this. And then, of course, your internal users are using applications outside, and your external users are using applications and services inside in a lot of the cases. But as far as the kind of implementation is there, then it comes down to how security is actually being built. Today's threat landscape, it's a big place, but those things that normally are found in companies and in different environments, they are only covering a small part of it. So if we really look what you cover with technical solutions, you are in the lower end. The bigger end, where there's all the big stuff actually happens, it's not so much covered or not even understood so well. So if we think about the budget, out of security budget, 90% is pretty much implemented into less effective solutions. But this is the part that is easy to understand, easy to explain to management, easy to get approval for. Then that stuff that is out of that scope, the bigger part, that is related more into the user identities and applications. That is left kind of uncovered because a lot of times the application part, if you have your own DevOps, they take care of that. And if you have ever worked with DevOps people, they are not so much security driven. They are more driven that the application either works or it doesn't work. Then the identity part, unfortunately, it's handled by the same people that handle, for example, the Active Directory type of functions in company, but that's not security trigger either. It's either you have a user account or you don't. How the threats actually split into this one. There's 28% of all attacks are directed towards user identities. They have a value. It's about $8 per user identity, but it has a value. So if you get usernames and passwords, you have pretty nice tools to avoid capturing, for example, user identities and the metadata related into user identities. Actually, that world has so many different vectors that it's hard to say how much of the actual attacks are really going into identities. The way to protect against these kind of attacks is encryption, multi-factor authentication, stuff like that. Applications, they get a lot of attention. 44% of those out-of-scope attacks, they go to applications. And why is that? Applications, they have the important data. All the information that has some value, really, it's behind applications. The kind of important data is not in a constant move. It doesn't go back and forth in your network. You have data storage, you have applications that process data. That's what is valuable. Think about like Facebook, a huge app that is part of smaller apps and everything else, lower function and so forth. It has a lot of valuable information. Google knows more about you than you know about yourself. That's pretty much it. If you go to Google knows when you sleep, when you eat, when you travel, especially if you have like Android phone in your pocket. Not just that you use Chrome browser, but when you have one of these, Google knows more about you than you know about yourself. It tracks everything. But applications, they gather so much important data that they will get, and they are getting a lot of attacks. So, actually 72% of attacks go to users and identities. There are multiple different measures to kind of protect yourself against these kind of activities. But are we actually able to see the attacks? Can we detect the attack if that happens? If it goes to the traditional and it's unencrypted traffic, there's a pretty good chance that we can. But if it's encrypted traffic, we have less and less means to see inside that. There was an earlier Cisco session where they were talking about metadata. That's kind of only way to approach if you don't want to decrypt the traffic or build other kind of visibility into this one. But that's kind of a different approach. You are not in control of all the networks where the traffic is passing through. That's kind of fact if it goes through bigger public networks. Then you need to go into behavioral analytics, and then you get into the engine kind of I cannot say artificial intelligence yet, but I would say more into the analytics of the big data, what has happened, the anomalies that have happened there. So you really need to start thinking about using machine to kind of detect things. But we will get into that a little bit later. Probably not is kind of the answer if we look from the perspective of the traditional technology, looking from the perspective of firewalls, IPSs, IDSs, anything that's between the user and application, they have less and less visibility into the traffic. So the bad stuff, anything that could be considered to be malicious or doing some harm or delivering something that you wouldn't want to have delivered to you or out of your systems, that goes through encrypted connections. And doing encryption, doing kind of a proprietary encryption, that's everyday stuff nowadays. Everybody's doing it. If they are not doing it right now, they will be doing it really soon. Every service that you use, they use encryption. Anything that you use over browser, it's pretty much encrypted. If it's not encrypted, you will get so much crap from your browser that you won't really use the service. It will make difficulties. So if you have like pizza service and you go there, order pizza, and it's not HTTPS, you are pretty much getting tons of complaints there. What happens? So traditional security solutions are pretty much blind in these kind of attacks that are within the encrypted connections. So in a world where there is unencrypted network, there is kind of a possibility that the security solution will see what is going through. But immediately, once you have a situation where the traffic is encrypted, there's no way to see or detect whatever is passing through. Because by the security technology that you have there, there's a secure tunnel and it's automatically trusted and ignored. In a case where you have a situation where it's not encrypted, there is still a good chance that the solution can detect it. Of course, in these cases, the latest and greatest malware, latest and greatest software that doesn't have something detectable entities, it will be also left undetected generally. So there are multiple different ways to do encryption really. As far as you are in a situation, this kind of good situation, everything's fine. But the world has pretty much moved into this already. And it is doing even more so. Right now, out of all internet traffic, 70% is encrypted, including streaming traffic. So how long does it take until it's around 100%? Not very long. 2 years ago, it was 30% of all internet traffic was encrypted. Suddenly, boom, 70%. And this is what's happening right now. That's why looking inside encrypted connections is important if you really, really want to avoid this kind of situation. So if you have invested into security that is traditionally, you still want to use it, then you need to help it to see inside the traffic. So what can we do? There are a few options, but these options are optional. You need to consider where the traffic is passing through, where the traffic is coming, where it's going, what's the technology on the back. So looking from the perspective of information security, you should be always protecting your services as close as the service as possible and your users as close as the user as possible. That's kind of the theory there that you should follow. At least that's kind of the mental map that you should go. So we need to think about the security a little bit differently. But what's the different way of thinking into the security? The essentials of security, if you talk with any C-level security person, CISO, every CISO wants to see into the traffic. There has to be visibility into the traffic. Visibility, what is happening within the systems that are in my control. Then there's the understanding of context. What is being done? Why it's being done? Who's using it? Why it's being used? Using what kind of devices? When it's being used? So the context understanding, point of presence of the users, that's important. And then control. You need to have a control. So if you have invested something into your security, you should be able to control and use it in a way that you want to use it. So if you have a security policy in place, you should kind of be able to enforce that security policy into the use of your needs. So let's look into this a little bit. Where we are as F5, we are normally between the user and application at some stage of the process. Traditionally, we have been the load balancer over there, but even more so, we are in front of the application as web application firewall. And in the process of the user identification, we are doing the federation, we are doing the multi-factor authentication. We are here, and we are here, and we can be between this communication, but not as a firewall. But we can help the firewalls. We can help the existing implementations that you have there. So when we are in that kind of strategic point, of traffic and communication. We can help to build that kind of visibility there. But the new way of thinking in this is that you can use this existing infrastructure in a more efficient way. And this pretty much means that you should be able to do policy chain or service chain. So you should be able to do policies where you can define different kind of use cases when traffic needs to pass through different kind of security checks before it can go into the other systems. There has been always ways to do this, but it comes down to tricky things like policy-based routing, for example. It can be really tedious to do. But you have been able to do it, but of course expecting that the devices can actually see inside the traffic. Before you can do this, you need to handle the traffic somehow. You need to be able to enforce certain policies and functions into place. To simplify this a little bit, when you have your users and devices that are using services somewhere out in the internet, at the internet, you need to get into the middle of that if you want to do things. And then you cannot really do man in the middle as it is. But you really need to break this down into two separate different sets of connections. One set of connections is when the user is going outside. If you have an orchestrating point of decryption of traffic, it has to be somewhere in the middle. It can be a physical box or it can be software. Of course, depends how much traffic you have there. That defines what kind of device you need to have there. And every time that there's a traffic coming in, there needs to be a detection of the user and device, so you know what it is. And then there needs to be policy in place what you're going to do the next to that traffic. Are you going to decrypt it or are you going to pass it through? If you're going to decrypt it, then which devices will get sample of this traffic? By over ICAP, maybe over VLAN connection, maybe over routing, you can decide. And then you are waiting for the responses from those security devices. If everything's okay, there's a second session that is being built out into the internet towards the service where it's going. So every time that there's a traffic going from the user all the way through this process, and then some security devices here, maybe through some passive device, maybe some antivirus device, or maybe next generation firewall. Then it will get back here, and then it will be re-encrypted with a different set of user session keys and encryption algorithm, whatever the service is requiring, and then it goes out into the internet. When it comes back, it goes through the same process in reverse, and then it gets back into the user. This is pretty much the process. But to the end user, it has to be as transparent as possible. So you need to select carefully what is going to be the certificate of the service that you're going to show to the user, because it's not going to be the original one, what is in the end of the actual service in the internet. So what is there, that is being secured and enabled by the orchestrating point. And then the internal part is being handled, whatever the internal has to be in different cases. Then you define policies. Which kind of traffic is going to pass through the system in different cases, and what is going to be passed through. By no means the idea here is that you try to decrypt everything. You need to define what you want to see. There is a lot of services that you cannot decrypt. Healthcare, personal services, banking, no way to decrypt that. Update services, Apple, Microsoft, no way to decrypt it. Some applications that lie on the internet, like Dropbox, Box.com, Google Drive, they use HTTP header certificate PIN. They have their own certification system in place, and that service in the internet is not going to trust to anything except to the clients that are installed with certain software or are presented with the original certificate. There are a lot of cases where you cannot decrypt traffic, and this is something that has to be kind of understood also. So there are cases where it doesn't make sense to decrypt traffic. And then there are cases where you need to carefully select what you want to decrypt. This is also a passing phase. At some point there's going to be so huge and so rich selection of different encryption algorithms that you need to start trusting some behavioral analytics of the traffic and so forth. But until then, this is a really good way of doing it. And this is a different way of doing it. Once the traffic goes out, it will be encrypted. So there's going to be encrypted traffic all the way through from the point of view of the application and by the point of view of the end user. This is really a transparent process, and it doesn't cause any extra constraint into the other security devices that are out there. And they don't even know that there's this kind of orchestrator really in there if you do it right. So, how about the application access part? When the users are enabling this kind of connection through the system, you need to really look into the application access aspect. How the user is actually getting into the application. What are the requirements before the user can try to do connection to the application? How tricky or how simple the authentication process is pretty much defines which kind of security is going to be enabled or disabled in that process. A lot of users look a simple way to authenticate and get into the services. So in those cases, it should be username, password, and maybe something else simple, easy to implement there. And then that should be it, meaning identity federation. So single sign-on to everything, strong authentication once, and then rely on that. SAML2, open authentication, open ID, those are the ones you should look after. Of course, Microsoft turns ADFS. ADFS is SAML2, but you get into that once you look into the technology a little bit more. So, actually, when the user is doing a login into the system, it should be a pretty straightforward process. So once the user is connecting into application or service, strong authentication and then strong encryption between the user and the application. That's what's going to happen there. Everybody's accessing different applications using different methods, but like you know, a lot of users like to use username and password, and they use the same password to every freaking service what they use. Even they tell you otherwise, they are lying. In a very few cases, if you do auditing of passwords, you audit the hash values of passwords, you can see how many systems are actually including the same passwords. It's amazing. You don't really need to see the passwords. Hash them and look after that. So, mobile working style, this is some way to get closer to user and provide security there. On the way, you can leverage what you already have, and then you can go after the application protection. Applications are a lot more trickier to protect because every application has their weaknesses. The weakness might be in a code, it might be in the publication service that is being used there, it might be in the server software, it might be in Apache, it might be in IIS, it might be in Tomcat. There's a lot of things that need to be considered before a user gets into application. Simple thing that can be still fooled nowadays is DNS. If you think about, we are talking about encrypted traffic. DNS is not encrypted unless you make it so. How many of you are using DNSSEC? Okay, pretty good. Last time that I asked, there was no hands. Either there were people that didn't want to tell that they're using it, or they didn't know even what the question was all about. But, okay, good. So you know DNSSEC. That is a simple thing to do because otherwise, if you can see DNS queries, you can get in the middle of that and filter that to do whatever. So you can get the user to go wherever if you just fiddle with that. But even more so, the application itself. Applications are easy to fool. Even this week, there was the Apache Struts vulnerability, if you saw that. Apache had a very nice vulnerability this week. So even though if you had the most secure software ever written in this world, running on top of Apache, the system could be hacked, cracked. And that's something that only way to protect against is web application firewall, which analyzes how the application works, how the file types are being used, and in this case, how the JavaScript is being used there. Nice. So you should look into that. That's very interesting. And even the easiest way of disturbing services and systems is DDoS attack. A lot of the DDoS protection mechanisms out there are stateless mechanisms trusting into some stream analytics or some sampling of traffic. If you really want to protect your application and environment, you should do stateful analysis for it. Problem there is that you have very few devices that can actually do it. You should really come and discuss more about that with us in our F5 booth later on. But that's a different thing. DDoS attack is something that you can learn by just watching a YouTube video. There's pretty much all the different hacks, all the different malicious activities have a YouTube video nowadays. So you don't need to be a trained hacker to do bad stuff. You only need Kali Linux and then a little bit time with YouTube, and there you go. Everybody can learn what Metasploit is and how to search different payloads in Metasploit, and then that's it. You should go and see what the clarified security guys are doing here. So they can explain that more into detail. But in a demo purposes, applications are really easy to take down and also do a lot of malicious stuff about. So if you go to have I been pwned site ever, go there and put your email address there. You will see how many different places you have been hacked. And that's due to the fact that the application or the web application has had some kind of faults. There are design flaws there because, first of all, HTTP is stateless. The kind of session mechanism there is normally hackable. So remember that. So when LinkedIn has been hacked, how many times Dropbox have been hacked so far? Once, twice? I think twice now. So the third time is pretty much coming at some point. Anyways, if it has hit twice, it normally hits also the third time. But a lot of systems are not really explaining how many times they hit. We have an ecosystem into this one. We have partnered with multiple different vendors and entities. We are never, I would say that F5 is never the only solution in security implementation. We are always part of the solution. Either we are ADC, either we are decrypting the SSL traffic, or we are doing the web application firewalling, which is a really big part of what F5 is doing nowadays. When we come into the security side of things, it's DDoS protection and web application firewalling where we get into. What Cisco doesn't do, VMware doesn't do, FireEye doesn't do. So everybody else are pretty much getting into the same group of vendors, and we are looking to provide kind of a common approaches. For example, Cisco has lately done a lot of amazing stuff. Cisco DNA, if you haven't really looked into that, look into that. It's an interesting approach. Looking into metadata of traffic. Same thing if somebody's kind of listening to you. Okay, now we're in Estonia, so. It wasn't so long ago that here in the hotel rooms when you made calls, you were kind of listened in. So who did you call? How long did the call last? It didn't matter what you said in the call. That's not important. But how often did you make the call and who did you call? That's the metadata. Same thing, the metadata, how many times you have used your home keys and when you have used those. That's more important than who went in and who came out. But that's interesting metadata. Cisco is approaching the world through that. That's interesting. It doesn't require so much visibility into the traffic, but it's more about layering stuff. Then what we are doing here, we enable the devices that are not able to see traffic, to see the traffic. So you don't really need to throw out your devices out of the data center at this point. And then there are white hat security, for example. You can scan your application, do vulnerability assessment, how vulnerable they are. If you do vulnerability assessment, is there anyone who's doing this as their main task or part of their work? In this room? Okay.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability scanning. Are you scanning your software or apps that you can? Okay. Testing. Okay, so you do the testing. So you know how leaky this stuff can be. So only way to patch and fix applications immediately is pretty much what we offer into the table. We don't have this capability, but we can offer something to the table in that. Splunk, nice CM systems and logging systems, so okay. They bring in that, and FireEye, still, they do really good malware analytics. where they are really good. So it's an ecosystem where you are. So thinking about the whole protection, if the traffic and communication between the user and application is encrypted, you can be part of the user part. When the user is accessing application, there are multiple things that you can do. And these are the things that F5 is doing there. This is what we offer to Cisco, this is what we offer to, for example, Palo Alto implementations and so forth. And then when the application needs to be protected, nowadays, well, and always, when F5 is in front of application, we do the SSL part. We have our own SSL stack that is not open SSL, it's what we make. So we have our own vulnerabilities there. I'm not here to say that we never had any vulnerabilities there. We have approximately 3 every year, give or take. But those are different than in the main market. So we can do the SSL part, provide the SSL inspection, of course, DNSSEC, firewalling, DDoS protection, but even more interestingly, the web application firewall. That's something that we have done since 2004. Now we got even in the Gartner analytics in the right upper corner, which I always hate, that they're showing like magic quadrant, but it's pretty cool to be there. So it's completely different world that you actually do in the network in the past there. And does it really matter what happens in the network? If you can be part of the user end with the endpoint protection and the authentication activities and the application end, then it doesn't really matter so much what is in the transfer between, what's coming and going through this system. You only need to remember that in information security, it's always about the confidentiality, availability, and integrity. You need to always guarantee that. And encryption is guaranteeing the integrity. These parts, applications, if they are not available, if somebody is able to do application layer DDoS, nice script that looks like normal traffic that will take down your backend. The application is down, boom. Well, in vulnerability testing, that happens quite often, right? And with the most stupidest things ever.
Yeah, you can never really estimate what can take down things.
Yes. Yeah, well.
Some really serious consequences.
Yes. And it might be the smallest thing ever.
Yes.
So the DDoS attack doesn't have to be a big volumetric network attack. It's when you do it to application. That's way more interesting. And doing those tests is always opening your eyes more what you should look after. It might be the application, it might be the platform, it might be something with the close proximity of that. So it might be even the network switch. Somebody scanning the network and the SNMP port has a vulnerability, it might crash the switch. Oh crap.
So, one ping as well.
Yeah, one ping can take it down. Very basic functionalities. And those are normally getting the lowest attention really in there. So it is really possible to look into the security that way, that you can build the security to match your requirements. Also the visibility into security. It's like if you already invested into your security solution a lot of money, you should always consider how you would like to use it right now and in the future. Security nowadays is a lot of doing. And if you stop doing it, then, well, you stop having security. So if you just trust that you bought something and now I'm done, like GDPR. There's a lot of companies, a lot of places that say that we are GDPR compliant because we have IIM. We have Identity Access Management System. Now we are GDPR compliant. We can say what's happening here. It's not so. It's a lot of other things. There's policies, it's practices, it's teaching the people. People are, in the end, they are the key in the security. And every time that I see somebody saying that, oh, we have 100% solution to something, it's not true. They are lying. So our solution in this case is to enable the visibility there, but you should consider when you want to see it there. And then consider everything else. Do your security that way, that you consider the places where you want to do it. Do you want to be here? Do you want to be there? And do you want to be in the back between? So that's pretty much it. So, any questions?
Regarding this slide, 2021, just about what kind of traffic you technically can't see into. Certificate pinning, probably client certificate authentication.
Yes.
Let's forget the legal part.
Yeah, those are the ones that well, in the legally then, of course, legal parts it's banking and healthcare, but otherwise that's pretty much it. HTTP header certificate pinning is pretty tricky process anyways. But nowadays you can also turn it off if you have looked into the Chrome browser and so forth, if you have full control of the endpoint. If you don't, then you don't.
Application in a mobile phone, which already has 15.
Yeah. And FTPS is something that we cannot see.
Okay.
So that's something. SFTP we can see in because we have in the firewall we have SSH proxy, or it's built into the operating system altogether. So we can leverage that if you want to see inside the SSH connections, but then you need to proxy those. Like in crypto auditor, for example, from other products, is something that we do similar thing.
What if F5 is configured as a reverse proxy, but it's not the endpoint of TLS? It's just looking at one suppose that you can see it when it has the keys and it's RSA.
Yes, but if it doesn't have the keys, then we cannot see.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's how PKI works. Yeah, but if we are reverse proxy in front of application, then we can of course deliver the information into the security device when it comes from outside people. So if you are just as a reverse proxy, as a load balancer in front of the application. That use case is from year 2001. It's an old one, really old one.
What about the web application firewall that you mentioned? Does it have a learning mode?
Yes. So how we have done it, there's the machine learning entity into that, so it can learn the application by itself. It can be transparent or it can be logging mode. It has a bot detection engine separately, so it does like JavaScript challenges into applications. It has almost top 10 signature list with the latest vulnerabilities, so to say, and then there's SANS 25. But then it has a lot of the parts that are not so much, it goes a little bit beyond this one. We can have a longer discussion of that afterwards, but looking into this list of things that WAF is really left to do, there's always the demo effect when you need to take something really fast out. So this is like a good question because WAF is something that everybody should have, but they don't when they have applications. Traditional WAF is pretty much doing all of this. What we have added into our WAF throughout time is to do more analytics. For example, heavy URL mitigation. To analyze, do you have a big file or small files in there? And if you have a slow part of the application, do report out of that. Send that back to the application developer. The other thing is to capture challenges and the bot detection. To detect what kind of user agent is coming in, and is it actually a bot or is it a real user? In that case, HTTP, the machine fingerprinting, so browser fingerprinting. So we do that. It's pretty cool feature because that's the metadata of the browser that is being leaked.
Is it just passively fingerprinting or actually include some JavaScript detectors?
Yeah, it does JavaScript. It's active. It's not passive protection, it's active protection. And it learns all the time out of the traffic what it gets.
I actually meant that whether we inject some JavaScript into the web application so you can actually, like, say, check what's the screen resolution.
Yes, we do that as well. And also, if it's a bot, we send some stupid math problems to tease the bot, because a lot of the bot networks don't know how to process JavaScript. That's one big thing. HTTP header certification, that's a big thing, because then you don't see what is in the backend when we are reverse proxy, so it doesn't leak the information of the backend servers and application kind of software that is running there. So there's a lot of stuff that happens in that. Well, since we got into this is the thing, what we normally see. We go somewhere, they say that they have already application protection in place because they have next generation firewall. According to Gartner report and according to practice, when you really know your stuff, this is like, then you know that next generation firewall is doing completely other stuff there. I don't say that they are unnecessary, but they are doing other stuff and they are getting more and more blind nowadays because a lot of the traffic is turning into HTTPS. And their capabilities to be encrypted are kind of various over there. Some are doing it pretty well, some are doing it pretty crappy, but Then when we get to web application firewalling, it's understanding SOAP, IAX, XML. What we do, what is different in factor to others, is also the HTTP or HTML5 WebSockets. We do analysis for that. There's a lot of interesting stuff. We can have discussion later on. So, thank you. We went to overtime quite a bit, so we should let the next speaker to get in.